Okay, hello everyone and good morning. It is a beautiful December day, and I want to thank you all for taking precious time out of your day to join us for this incredible webinar, Business Owner Burnout Prevention, How to Turn Overwhelm into Overcoming. My name is Stephanie Tang. I'm the marketing manager for Class Act Media, and joining me today is the amazing Dotun, who is a registered psychologist specializing in burnout prevention. So I will go ahead and do a quick introduction for the both of us, and then I will hand it off to her to talk about all of the amazing tips that she has for us today. So I will start briefly with myself. As I mentioned, my name is Stephanie, and I've been in marketing for about 8 years. So I've been privileged to work in hospitality, tourism, and telecommunications. So a lot of experience across a number of industries. And I've worked in all aspects of marketing. So everything from social media management to SEO, PPC, advertising, traditional ads, all of that kind of stuff. So my goal is to help businesses drive results, and I'm truly happy to get to do what I do and help businesses grow. And now on to our guest speaker. So Dotun has various areas of practice. However, rehabilitation psychology and managing work-life balance are her core passions. Over time, she's had the privilege of walking alongside individuals with diverse backgrounds, and the common narrative that is shared is a strong alignment with conscientiousness as a core value. The passions she pursues are primarily driven by core values such as balance, flexibility, equity, pragmaticism, and sustainability. And she truly feels these core values are relevant components that support mental health and successful integrations with the workplace. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and hand it off.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie, for the introduction. Thanks, everyone, for joining, for taking the time to join as we talk about burnout, an experience that feels new, yet it is a very old in human experience. I'll start off with a little bit about me. So first off, I am number 5 of 6 children. I have a first degree in commerce, and the last role that I held in that industry was a settlement analyst for an electricity generating and trading company. I completed a Master's of Counseling program in 2017, and about 14 to 16 months ago, I decided to start off, excuse me, a doctor of psychology program, and that's a journey that I'm excited to continue on. In 2017, one particular event that brought all of this together for me was I had a lot going on. I failed to recognize what was happening to me at the time, and I experienced a physical symptom of burnout as dictated by my body. And after much research and inquiries, I have classified this as a stress-induced alopecia. This is what I have had so far. And I feel this experience, coupled with the limited awareness that I had at the time, as well as the limitation of the knowledge I had at the time, this continues to fuel my passion about burnout management. And so far in this process of learning for me, the condensed tagline for how I proactively try to manage burnout is to keep what is important to me as the center, as something that keeps me balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. So as we get started, there are some terms that I just want us to kind of go over quickly, not to belay them, but I like to kind of get a setup of what do we think overwhelming is, right? What does that mean? And what does stress mean? What does burnout mean? And we put all of that together to set the stage of how we can manage that in the workplace. So the term overwhelm, from all the different dictionaries that I looked at, came to words like crushing, submerged, extreme, something that feels great, and something that feels devastating. Okay, there's other, if you can go to the next slide, please. There's the other pieces of the word as described by the Harvard Business Review, and they coined or described it as mental slowness, confusion, raising mind, impaired problem solving. For me, these two things seems to describe different aspects of what overwhelming can be. Dictionaries seem to be giving that physical description of how overwhelming can feel or paint a picture, whereas the Harvard Business Review seems to focus more on the cognitive representation of being overwhelmed. One thing that came up as I was looking up, brushing up the information on this is there is the idea of when someone says that overwhelm, it seems to also translate to a perception of weakness. I hope that as we go through all of this today, we'll be able to decipher and properly place the idea that when one feels overwhelmed, it's not a sign of weakness. Rather, it is an indication that something bigger is happening and we need to manage it. Okay. The next word is stress. Excuse me. So according to the World Health Organization, stress is a natural state of worry, a mental tension that is caused by a difficult situation. And because it's a natural state of worrying, it prompts a response for us to address the challenges or the threats that we feel. And how we respond to stress makes a difference in our overall well-being. From the psychological lens, they're saying the definition does not deviate from World Health Organization, but they added that an unhealthy management of stress impacts nearly every system of the body, up to our feeling and behavior. And it causes the mind and body to change in ways that impacts the quality of life. When I talk about stress, I usually recommend this video by Kelly McGonigal. It's a TED Talk where she talks about how to make stress your friend. So feel free to check that out. She has quite a few insights that connects the physiological response to stress and our heart rate, the health of our heart and how we interact in the world around us at the time. Okay.
I love that idea. Stress is your friend is not something that you would normally think about, right? We're like, oh no, I don't want to be stressed. I do everything I can to not be stressed.
Yes. And that's how she started off her TED Talk, saying she's been giving people information to avoid stress all her career life. And she wants to turn that around to say, hey, running from stress feels like a stressful thing to do. So let's come back and reset it. It is natural. It's normal. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to say is when you look up what types of stress exist, for me, even, excuse me, as a person that works with stress, I was a little confused. And I remember calling Stephanie like, I don't know. It seems like there's just so much information out there. It was stressful to wrap my head around it. However, it came down to the same concepts that I have always understood. There are two distinct types of stress, but we talk about one more than the other. So eustress is the good kind of stress, the one that feels manageable, the one that feels like, you're progressing and you're making leaps and bounds. Distress, on the other hand, is the ones that we feel every day, where it feels unmanageable. Distress can be your physical distress, financial distress. So all the types of stress that if you were to Google it, that you find is under distress. Eustress seems to be one that, we fail to maybe recognize per se. All right. The other word that we're looking at is burnout. So what is burnout? I can go I can go on and on about it. However, the word was first coined by a clinical psychologist in 1974. Excuse me. And what he had borrowed the word burnout from the illicit drug use scene that he was trying to help with at the time. And burnout in that drug use culture at the time is used to explain the devastating effects of chronic drug use. So I find that interesting to say, okay, these days we're experiencing burnout, like that word is used to describe that overwhelming feeling, chronic use of our resources, our time and our energy without refilling it as necessary. All
I
right.
really love this image that you picked here, Dotun, because it just starts with, it's on fire, and then all of a sudden it's halfway down, and then all of a sudden all of it is gone. And I think that's really relatable because you go and you say, oh, I'm a little tired, or I'm a little stressed, or that you don't realize that you're actually in burnout until it all comes crumbling down all at once. And it just feels so overwhelming that it happens that way.
Yeah. So when the match is on fire, if we were to kind of use the words we've been describing so far, that's if it's when it's sustainable, that sort of feels like that state of eustress where you're managing and you're not kind of going over to the other side. That last match does not look good. Right.
Definitely not.
Yes. So some of the words that was used to describe burnout is excessive demand on energy, strength, or resources in the workplace, right? So that seems to tie back into definitions that are synonymous with overwhelm, feeling overwhelmed. And so with all of that information of the terms we'll be using throughout, I'd like us to take, those with us and move into the world of occupation and business ownership. So keep those definitions in mind as we talk about those terms in the context of business and such. Okay. All right. So when you think about business ownership, what does that mean to you? Right? For me, in reviewing this, it came down to, business ownership means, I have to plan. I have to be productive. I have to have this idea of forecasting and managing profits. Hustling, stress sometimes comes into that actually. And sustainability, right? Because if you're a business owner, you're responsible for a lot of whatever goes on in that business, right? Your livelihood and such. Think about the news that we have around today around interest rates, the GDP, and networking. If you are not a very social, outgoing person, networking can be a source of stress. And so those are the things that kind of came together for me, right? And I'm hoping you take some time to look at that for yourself too. And in thinking about what business ownership is, I'm often curious, if we look at the cost of owning a business, if we look at the risk management side of business, specifically, that idea of maybe the human capital that is part of the business. So in productivity, are you considering all of that? Idea of the cost and the human capital. Those things tend to not necessarily have a price. Okay. And so when we take that lens and we say, okay, we've talked about what the terms stress, overwhelm, burnout, we've looked at the workplace. It's now time to kind of take a look at, say, okay, we know burnout happens, we know stress happens, we're not trying to avoid them, but how can we progressively try to manage them? So in doing this, there are words that I want us to keep in mind. So for starters, excuse me, the ing and the at the end is capitalized for a reason. And for me, I'm trying to get your attention to say, hey, these things that are strategies or coping ways to proactively manage burnout, they're actions that you do over and over and over and over again. It's not a one-time deal, right? So we try to say overcoming, like that seems like something that's you have to kind of manage on a daily basis, right? So let's start with that. What is overcoming, right? So again, I love words. So sorry, like I geek out on words quite a bit. I love language because I feel like there's a lot of things that we miss if language is very subtle sometimes. I think I was talking to Stephanie saying I came across the word allegiance. And then like, that's such an old English word. I wonder how it even makes sense in today's world. For me, there was no connection. Anyway, all that to say, in looking at the words here, the ones that are capitalized are probably showing my my biases. So overcoming is to reduce, to prevail, to defeat, to triumph. I love the word mastery, right? To solve, to win, to be victorious, right? And because we gain mastery today in an area doesn't mean that tomorrow we won't have something else we need to master. All right. Victory is not a one-time deal. It's like always. So that's a motion for me. The word overcoming also showed up as I was geeking out again in the idea of nursing. So nursing schools seem to have a theory around overcoming. And for them, they described three things. They said, first, you have to recognize or acknowledge that there's a problem or there is an outcome that you do not like. And then secondly, you have to demonstrate some readiness and determination to change or solve the problem. And thirdly, you have to believe in your own efforts to create change and solutions. So the words they offer include deliberate, thoughtful, process, changing, and if you click one more time, Stephanie, conquering adversity, right? So I like how these words come together to create a scenery where you look at it and you kind of you have to want to solve the problem. If it's not a problem for you, then there's really nothing to be solved, if that makes sense, right? Excuse me. So in trying to overcome, we want to be intentional. We want to be able to believe in ourselves, that we have the capacity to drive the change we want. Okay. The second word that we have is protecting, right? So when I asked you to consider what business ownership means to you, and I said, did we consider risk management? So risk management is what you do when you're trying to protect something, when you're trying to minimize exposure to unpleasant outcomes, right? For this one, I have a poll that I'm hoping everyone can kind of participate. And the question that I have is, what is your greatest asset, right? So if you take a screenshot, well, QR thing and spend a moment for us to see. What is your greatest asset? It's supposed to pop up on the screen, right? Yay, someone's typing.
Yeah, it will. It'll pop up for sure. And this is really interesting, right? Because it's not something that you think about a lot. It's not, unless someone asks you, you're not actively thinking about stuff like this, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah.
Resilience is definitely a big one. Oh, kindness. That's a great one too.
You can enter more than one thing if you want to. Elasticity. Love
Ooh,
it, love it.
elasticity, determination. These are all great answers.
Mm-hmm. I love elasticity.
Me too.
Yeah, in my mind, that goes to being flexible, right? Stretch. The
Determination.
Incredibles.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have a lot of all of these things to own a business. That's for sure.
All right. I was telling Stephanie, like, I like when I propose this question, and I'll just keep talking as people keep typing in. I love asking this question with so much confidence that, I feel like the answer that I feel will discover, no one puts that in, right? And that's, I think that really goes to speak to maybe within cultural context that we all live in, that the assets, right? They look different for each person.
Yeah.
But if I was to tell you that there is one asset, right, that in answering these questions, oh, you have to go back, in answering these questions that you've missed, right? I'm very, very confident about that, right?
Patience. That's a good one.
Yes. So when I ask what is your greatest asset, it's very easy for us to pick things like this. But behind that, even before we get to that, is the concept of the mind. So for me, the mind is the greatest asset, right? I've had the opportunity to ask these questions of, health professionals. And I say, when they say someone's in a coma, what's missing? Right? Because the body is there, it's functioning, heart rate is there. And they said, well, the person's not there. And that's the mind from my lens, right? The mind is such an abstract part of being human that you can't see it on an MRI scan. There's no way to say, here, this is where your mind is, right? So the greatest asset that we all have is the mind. The mind helps us to make sense of the world. The mind helps us to navigate the world. We create things via the mind. We explore the world around us via the mind. And that, I feel, when I first got this concept really deep into myself, I'm like, okay, I guess we are going to protect the mind in as many ways as possible. Because I can't really do anything else if my mind is not feeling balanced. Okay. Thank you. So that's what, when it comes to protecting, I would say, to anchor that. And I should give that the reference where I got that idea of the mind being the greatest asset is from Headspace. Dude, I can't remember his name now. The owner of Headspace. Okay, so the next word that I want us to take a look at is anchoring. Anchoring is what is sustainable. Anchoring is holding steady, right? So we've gone through overcoming, we've gone through protecting, and now it's, okay, how do you anchor what you know, right? And hopefully we get to spend a little bit more time on this one. Because the first thing I'd say, for us to be able to proactively manage burnout, there's the need to reflect, right? And when you think about reflecting, I feel like we use that word very loosely these days. Everyone's like, well, I did a self-reflection, or I'm reflecting on these choices I need to make. From me, I'm coming at this from a different lens of, as a business owner that's driven and passionate about what you do, how do you first manage the business that you are creating, so that day in, day out, you overcome the hurdles that might come your way. And secondly, as you're creating momentum in your business, how do you protect that, right? And all of this still comes back to, as the designer of your business, the brain behind it, how you function also reflects in your business. Okay, so reflecting, I like to think in pictures. And for me, when I look at that, it feels like, oh, what's the name of that character, Stephanie? I've forgotten now. Not Captain America.
Oh, Iron Man. Iron Man,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. It feels like that with this fancy technology where you can move stuff from one place to the other and you can talk to some, I don't know what his assistant's name was,
Oh,
to kind
Jarvis.
of
Yeah.
rearrange
Yeah.
things. Yeah, so that for me is what reflecting looks like, is for me to pause and my brain just opens up all of the stuff that's happened in a day, for instance, and I say, okay, this thing that happened here makes sense. I'm going to file it here. This makes sense. I'll file it here. This, and then you kind of rearrange the story of your experiences so that it makes sense to you, right? If you were not able to reflect effectively, it looks to me like a filing room with paperwork everywhere. And if we go back to the mind being the greatest asset, that doesn't feel organized at all.
The messy filing cabinet.
Messy. That some cabinets you're really scared to open because you don't know what's in there.
Oh, yeah. That's a later mess.
So for a quick practice today, I'm thinking, can you reflect on values in general, right? What are values? We talk about them frequently. I feel like sometimes there's some words that become popular and trending, right? This does not, align with my values. I have a 15-year-old going to 16, and she'll use words, statements like, well, mom, that's your value. It's not mine. Or that's your opinion at this time. I value my friends, and so I'm not going to do my homework right now. Something along that line.
Does that work?
Right? But I think part of it is, we've entered into a world where there's all sorts of things out there that we can align with, right? And if we're not able to decipher what is ours versus what is everything else, I feel that that can become problematic, right? So pause and just like take a moment and think, right? There's this idea of, and I shared this with Stephanie, like imagine your values are as a mountain, right? Values in general, in human cultures and experiences, there's this idea of we're aspiring to be a version of ourselves that feels optimal and feels comfortable, right? And I feel like the disappointment sometimes is we're climbing this mountain that's defined by who knows who. And you get to the top of that mountain, you're like, this is not the mountain I wanted to hike. Right?
Yeah, this view sucks. We did not want to be here.
Yeah, right. And as business owners, there's so many things that we have to consider, right? The value, economic values, right? Social values. And while there's a buffet of all of these, you have the capacity to pick and choose what goes on your plate, right? And that is why like your values are so important. So I think there's a poll as well, just to say, what are, just off the top of your head, if there are 2-3 things that you think describes your core values, just you can share that. Standards.
Authenticity. Nice.
Nice. Honesty. Yeah. Transparency. Yeah. Awesome. I don't know if there's more people typing. Um, but these values are very important in the sense that we have typically our core values have been influenced for a long time. Um, Ever since you were a child, see people act a certain way around you, and you have chosen to adapt those things. Our values tend to be able to stand the test of time. Our values also helps us to navigate the world around us. I feel like in some cases where um, someone does something and the person says, I don't understand how someone can behave like that, right? It just doesn't make sense. Sometimes I feel like that's a value thing. And I say, you'll never understand why that person did that because it's not a lens that you use to navigate the world, right? You don't go for someone who values transparency to saying, no, you don't care for transparency, right? So I hope I'm stringing this together nicely. As a business owner, to actively manage or proactively, intentionally manage burnout, your core values, hopefully they are aligned with your business values.
Mm-hmm.
Your core values hopefully are, clarified enough for you to confidently turn down a business offer or turn down pursuing something that doesn't align, right? Hopefully your core values also helps you to clarify what is important to you as a person in the sense that you feel unified, right? I was saying to Stephanie that the sources of our values also informs our identity, right? How you see yourself, if the Dotun that shows up amongst friends is very different from the Dotun that shows up in the workplace, or that shows up. I have a few students that I supervise that shows up there. It feels so stressful to kind of take that leap, right? But not to say you show up as the same with the same lens in everywhere, but there is a basic understanding of what your values are, and it is consistent regardless of where you are. So if someone says, well, authenticity is a thing that I value. So, I mean, being a parent, you have to be, well, not you have to. It's best if you're authentic with your children because they would see the difference between your actions and what you say, that discrepancy. In partnering, whether it's a romantic partner or business partner, transparency becomes even more important, right? Honesty. So in over time, from my experience, there's some context where a core value is highlighted more than anything else. So for me, I say like flexibility is such a huge value for me. I've had opportunities to work in places where I go like, Kate, the way you've structured this, it feels like I will not have the flexibility to do X, Y, Z. I'm a parent, and one of my kids manages carries an EpiPen. Sometimes the school calls because they've had exposure to something, or even I've just had. If the phone rings and it's the school, my heart skips a beat because I'm like, what's happened now? So I need that flexibility to be able to get up and leave, should that be necessary, right? The more you refine your core values, it tends to help paint the picture of what is important to you. What will you not negotiate?
So
Right?
I have a question about that one. If
Yes.
you're in the thick of it, let's say, and you started a business because you wanted to spend more time with your family, and now you're experiencing burnout from your business. How do you distance yourself and re-anchor yourself in those core values?
It's a loaded question, Stephanie. Hopefully you take care of your body before your body takes care of you. Because if you're in that space where you're so burned out, you would be forced to kind of take a step back. I feel like if the workplace, I'll use this example. I'd worked with a lawyer at some point, and he had is in the presenting concern was, hey, everyone in my life, my family, my friends, they're giving me like a below standard score. How I'm showing up as a friend, how I'm showing up as a father, how I'm showing up as a partner. In that world of relationships, everyone's mad at me and I don't get it. Like maybe like something's wrong with them, kind of thing.
Oh no, they
Right?
gave me a D minus. How dare they?
Yes. He said, even the dog is mad at me. And so we kind of stepped back and said, well, what's happening? But at the end of the day, he had worked over 400 billable hours in a month.
Billable, that's crazy.
Billable, not
Billable, yeah,
not
not just,
counting other things.
oh my goodness.
And it took about 3 to 4 years of working together to kind of get past that hump. Right? We're not usually aware, at least from my experience, even in 2017 when I was going through all of that, this was just what needed to happen. And the moment I took a rest, and I feel this is your intention in this, in putting this together, Stephanie, is this is a moment that people tend to slow down and plan for the next year or reset for the next year. The moment I stepped back, my body had time to start telling me, hey, I need this rest. Right? Hey, you've pushed too hard. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely really relatable, right? Because as long as you're going, you tell yourself you can keep going. You
Yes.
force yourself to keep going. The minute that you stop, it's just like it happens all at once, or something
Yeah.
triggers that collapse. Like I remember when I had burnout, I didn't realize it until like one day my Starbucks order was wrong and I like burst into tears. And it was like the weirdest thing where I'm like, this isn't necessarily a big deal normally, but I'd gotten to that point where it couldn't. And that was the one thing where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm burnt out. I need to stop.
Yeah. And some of the symptoms around burnout, if you, look at it, is you tend to want to do more. So if you used to work 4 hours and have, I don't know, a 10-page report done, that's ridiculous that you can do 10 pages in 4 hours. But if you're getting closer to, you're moving from that eustress to distress to burnout, 4 hours and 10 pages now becomes an equation that is harder to meet. So you spend more time trying to do and achieve that goal. But by doing so, it's like we're digging ourselves deeper into that space of burnout. We tend to also, put things like when core values are unclear, we tend to put things that are important at the back burner. It's like, oh, I'll get back to it later, right? So to maybe circle back to that question of how do you know, for me, that value of what's important to me, I described, my family positioning, and my friends, right? So if a friend calls me up and say, hey, Dotun, it's 7 o'clock. Let's leave work and go for, a yoga class or coffee or tea or something. If I say to myself, hey, I love to go, but I have one more email to send or one more report. That for me is a yellow flag of why am I putting my needs, right, to connect with a friend behind to kind of give priority to this email or to whatever it is, right? And it doesn't mean that that equation is incorrect. It's just to say, pause, think about it, right? And reset. So if it is that I do need a break from it, then I'll go and do that. But if it is that I'm just trying to catch up and feel like I cannot take a break, then that's also an indication that, hey, you do need the break, right? And most creative thinking and productivity happens when you do take a break, regardless of how much we try to say, just keep going and keep going.
Right.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Steph. Oh, we have to go. So in one more slide back, I think. Yes. Back.
Oh, sorry.
All right. So one more back. In all of this, as you consider anchoring yourself as a business owner, I want you to think about values that help you have moments and pockets of downtime, pockets of rest, right? Because in that space, we do more of our thinking. In that space, we are more productive. In that space, we are managing the stress and the demands on us in a way that helps to feel balanced and not a zigzag like a stock market kind of profile.
I love that.
Right. Yes. Right. So in all of these, I also want to say, at the end of it, finding your balance will look different, right? What you hope to achieve is different from what I hope to achieve. A life-work balance. I know that I've been trying to change this from work-life balance to life-work balance. And that for me is my physical cue, as well a mental cue of what is important to me, right? Everyone in this room, whether you own your business or you work for somebody else, we're all replaceable, right? If something happens to me today, it just stops, right? So arranging life in a way where you have life and work is a piece of life, right? For me, when I heard the word work-life balance, it was like, okay, you find work and then try to fit life into it. But I'm trying to reverse that. It's like, okay, I've got life, and then I want to see how work fits into that, right? When you think about what makes life balanced, it's sort of, the solution looks a little bit different now, right? You want to sleep. We have 24 hours in a day. I've had one, I usually give this pie chart of time to individuals and say, okay, create a pie chart around how you spend your time, right? So you have 24 hours in a day. You can take away 6 to 8 hours out of that 24 hours for sleep. So when you're promising as a business owner and say, okay, I'll get back to you in 24 hours, or we can get that project done in 48 hours, are you taking away sleep, right? So from 24 hours, you got sleep. Depending on where you live, your commute time, you take that away too, right? So Calgary, a lot of like half an hour to most places. So that leaves you with, are you doing the math? 24 minus 8? That's like
16, so now you're down to 14, I think. Yeah.
16 minus an hour or two for commute leaves you with 14 hours. You spend 8 hours at work. If you're self-employed, you're most likely spending way more than 8 hours at work, right? And then, people bounce the words around like, well, you should do self-care. Well, if you take 10 hours out of 14 hours, it's only 4 hours left. That's if you work 10-hour days, but I'm sure most of us do more than 10-hour days, right? So you have 4 hours to do what? I don't know, catch up with notes, do self-care if it's on the radar, play with kids, nurture relationships, and exhaustion, right? You're tired. Yeah. So yeah, we didn't even factor the time to cook.
Yeah.
Because
Cooking,
all of that,
dishes, laundry, so many
yes,
chores.
yeah. So for me, in supporting individuals who, trying to rebalance that, um, the first homework, and it's every person that I've given that to tends to look at me and say, I'm not a child. I know what I do throughout my day. Like, yes, you do, but let's put it on paper, right? Um, how do you spend your day, right? Your calendar, the things you do tend to reflect what's important to you, right? If it's balanced or if it's not balanced, right? I worked with um, a physician who specialized in complex pregnancies. And when I said, how do you rest? She looked at me like it was such a strange word. It's like, we don't have time for rest. And it makes sense to me because when you watch the show Grey's Anatomy, everyone's hustling. Right?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
rest. Yeah. Okay. So that's like for me, the ways that I try to put together a foundational and I feel sustainable way to refocus, to challenge, and to reframe what makes life balanced for me. So that scenery of, well, the perception of feeling overwhelmed and unmanageable doesn't happen too frequently anymore, right? And I feel like, from my own experience, the idea of that uh, stress-induced alopecia. I've got my hair back, but that area of my head that it used to throb. It's like there's just this throbbing sensation that I never understood. My physician didn't understand what it was, but until I was out of that program of that stress, overwhelming space, that throbbing, it was a signal that my body was saying, hey, you're overdoing it. But I didn't really realize that until much later, right? All right, so what is functional for you? And this is just me playing around with my childhood. One of the classes I had to take when I was a child was like verbal aptitude. We have questions like this is to this as that is to that. So for me, functionality is to sustainability as balancing is to adapting. So how do you create a business plan, a business process that merges with your life? It's adaptable, right? If things happen, you can shift easily, right? Are you delegating? Are you the only person that can do X, Y, Z? So it's those kind of little things, not so little, but they're little things that can make a difference between feeling overwhelmed, burnout, or functional and balanced. And yeah, that is my little spiel around burnout. I could talk forever. I think I did better this time. The last time I tried it with Stephanie, I went over by 20 minutes. And she's like, no, we cannot do that.
No, you did amazing. Thank you so much, Dotun. And it's such an interesting, well, it's a relevant topic now. I feel like people didn't really talk about burnout a lot. People would never come out and say I was burnt out. And COVID, I think, brought that to the forefront where people started talking a lot about their mental health.
Yes, yes, yeah.
All right, awesome. So we do have a Q&A. So anyone who has a question, feel free to either drop it in the chat or you can also unmute yourself. But yeah, we have time for a couple questions if anyone wants to ask Dotun anything about burnout or how to recenter yourself.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Okay, first of all, it's a great presentation. Thank you, Dotun. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So my question is, if you have a business that you really enjoy and the stress that comes from it is more like stress because it's something you enjoy doing,
Yes.
how do you prevent that from turning into de-stress and burnout? Because I mean, like you said, you can have a business and work 16 hours. So
Yes.
eventually it turns into de-stress and burnout. So how do you prevent that from happening?
Yes, thank you so much. That question is very relevant because when you're passionate about something, it feels like a double-edged kind of sword, because you're so passionate, you run towards it and forget to take care of yourself. The lens that I would view that as is there is still a limit, right? If you are working 16-hour days, then that means you're neglecting other aspects of your life that is just as important. So there's the idea of you value and you're passionate about the business, but there are other aspects of your life that still needs your attention. So how you kind of shimmy and move those around becomes important. Thank you. And he's joining us from Maryland.
Yes.
Maryland, that's awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions for Dotun? That was a great one, Eric. Thank you. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, we'll move on. So if anyone needs any additional support or would like to talk to Dotun more about this topic or needs help, or anyone on the Renew Psychology team, you can go to Renew Psychology and book an appointment there. I just wanted to thank everyone for attending. And as an exclusive webinar offer to help support your businesses in the new year, take something off of that plate so you can spend more time resting, we are offering a 1-hour consultation that comes with a 1-page action plan. So that's valued at $350. And if you choose to have us execute that plan, you do get 10% off. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can go ahead and scan that QR code or go ahead and type that link in. It'll take you right to my calendar, and I'd be more than happy to sit down and have a discussion with you. And the last part of this, if anyone would like to stay, we are offering an open networking session. So feel free to turn your cameras on if you like and get to know other businesses in the room. But that is it for today. And I want to thank everyone again for taking precious time out of your day to join us. I want to thank you, Dotun, for that awesome presentation. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great rest of their week.